All right, it's 1:30, y'all. You gonna go do your business, go do your business.
What business?
All right, I don't know. It's 1:30, I'm gonna go ahead and call to order the Rockdale Planning and Zoning meeting of Tuesday, August 6, 2024. Could I have a roll call, please?
Chair Williams,
Here.
Commissioner Jay Williams,
Here.
Commissioner Davidson,
Present.
Commissioner Miles.
Here.
Commissioner Ratliff,
Here.
Commissioner Willie,
He's not gonna be here.
Commissioner Barcheck,
He's gonna run late if he makes it.
and Council Liaison Starnes.
All right, it's good that we have a quorum. Let's go ahead and stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we're at Citizens Communication. Heather is here on an item not on the agenda. Would you like to speak now?
Yes, so,
You have to go to the podium and tell us who you are, where you live.
not address, just city.
No, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Heather Cruz, I live in technically Milano, out in the country, but I operate a business here, the coffee shop in Rockdale. And I just had a question, had to do with the middle of page 2 on the notice for the food vendor ordinance regulations. I'm hoping for a really detailed answer, as much as I can get, for the reasons behind the light item that states drive-through service for mobile food vendors is prohibited. I'm looking for specifics as to, logic, reasoning why, that sort of thing is stated as a blanket statement, or, any kind of information you have.
We can't really answer the question. We can field the question, note it, and we'll address it. Have you been to code enforcement?
No, I was just told to come here as the first thing. I don't know
yeah,
where to
it's me
go.
as
Yeah.
well.
Okay. Is that under where we're talking about drive up to a trailer? Is that
Yes.
Yeah,
in that area?
yeah, and we can't answer, but we can field it, and then we can bring it back to you if you like, or staff can handle it on our own with Heather. It's your discretion.
Okay, that it?
That's,
If
that
you're-
gets
if you-
everything rolling.
If you're through, yes?
Yep.
All right, thank you. That concludes citizens' communications, and then brings us to the presentation from me on the last city council meeting. And before I get into that, at that city council meeting, well, we had the new city manager sworn in. The name is Tim Kelty, and I would like you to introduce yourself, sir, please.
Good afternoon, my name is Tim Kelty, and I started on the 11th, so it's been extremely hectic 3 weeks getting acclimated and learning all about all things Rockdale. I appreciate council's confidence in selecting me to fill this role, but I think that we have some great things ahead of us. So, Barbara Holly has been fantastic and, has helped tremendously in the transition, and I want to give her credit for that as well. So, thank you all, and I look forward to working with you.
Welcome aboard, sir.
Thank you.
So that brings us to the last council meeting, and I didn't think we had much on it. Glad I was there because it was almost all P and Z. Under ordinances, they had considered taking any necessary action on the first reading of an ordinance amending the Rockdale Code of Ordinances, adopting a comprehensive city plan. So basically, this is their first reading to accept the comprehensive plan presented by Freeze and Nichols Associates, and that approved. And then they had to consider and take necessary action on the second reading of an ordinance on the subdivision regulation to grant the planning commission final authority over all short form plats not requiring a variance. And we've already addressed all that. We just need to finalize our reading tree of how we're gonna deal with what comes before us, and so that they have a written plan that we follow. But we've got to write a plan, present it to them. But that was approved, it's up with that annotation. Consider and take any necessary action on the second reading of an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance, rezoning certain parcel of land. This is the one that we had before us that had to change from agricultural to residential. If you remember, before they could move on anything else. So it was approved to change it from agricultural to residential single family. Consider and take any necessary action on the second reading of an ordinance to amend the zoning by rezoning a certain parcel of land and from residential single family to commercial light. And that was a subdivision that y'all worked on. And so that also approved. And then consider and take any necessary action on a recommendation to the City Council regarding a plat submitted by Philip Vargas. And that was the first one that we were talking about from agricultural, and they approved that. So it went from agricultural to residential. Once it became residential, then they could approve the plat, and they did. And then consider and take any necessary action on a recommendation regarding a plat submitted by Angela White. Ditto, same thing. This is the one from Angela White. And once it got changed to the commercial PUD, then they were able to pass that. And they did. And we're gonna have a workshop on something that happened on that next month, I think, right? Okay, so that concludes my presentation on the last city council meeting. Action items.
Did you wanna let her know she can stay or leave?
Oh, yeah, we can't address your question. You're certainly welcome to stay for all this excitement. But you know, if you wanna leave, you can leave or you can stay.
Okay, is it just like a half-hour thing? I don't even know. I've never been to something like
It could be.
Could be, or it could be
that. Well, we'll see how it goes.
it could be 2.5 hours.
It could be. All right, 5A, review and approve the minutes from the meeting on July 2nd, 2024. That should be in the next page of your packet.
Make a motion to approve minutes as read.
Question,
Oh, go ahead.
are we talking about the one on 4A? Where it said, Mr. Powell, he didn't vote on, I don't know if we're correcting that right now, but he didn't vote on that. He thought he was here for the property on the east side, but the guy ended up dropping out, or whoever dropped out.
All right, so it was
He
all,
wasn't here for
it's
that.
all void, null and void.
Right, right.
Yes.
So he wasn't a part of the Bushdale Road voting.
That was the one you chaired. I was on
Yes.
vacation, right?
Yep, and everything,
Everything
once,
else is legit,
yes, everything, the day after, he pulled his
what it is, yeah.
request. So
Right.
everything was just white plain. Barbara called me, she said just, it's like it never happened.
Cool. Cool.
So again, I make a motion to accept minutes as read.
Motion made and seconded that we approve the minutes and pass. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion made, seconded, and approved. Received the monthly code enforcement report.
Good afternoon, Commission. So as you can see on your report from July, the numbers have increased by roughly about 40 for the month. If you want to look at your totals, you have a total of 65 trash, 209 high grass and weeds, and then 48 other cases, whether that be tree overhanging right-of-way, property maintenance issues, things of that nature. If you look down at the bottom of page 1, it gives you the statistics for our fiscal year, which is coming to a close in October. We've completed 244 cases. We've voided 26 others, which we now have a plan in place with the new city manager on how we're going to handle those. We have 21 currently in court and then 31 that are open because they still have the time frame to comply before going to see the judge. And then if you flip to page 2, as P&Z's asked, I keep a running total from when code enforcement to get back from the police department and started acting on a proactive basis. We've completed 987 cases, 67 of those are void, 27 are still in court, and then 32 are open. With that, I'll field any questions that you may have about the report.
Being on high grass and non-compliance, do we have a repeat offender on 1806 Murray?
Yes.
Okay. Is that backyard is very visible from the street because it has a chain link? Has that been taken into consideration as well? Because, I mean, that's causing, I'm sure they never even get the front done.
Yeah. So we operate on right of way, of course, and then we can also act on an alley basis. And so we started having more alley phone calls lately that
Yeah.
this neighbor's maintaining their half of, usually it's a 10-foot easement, they're maintaining their
Which I
5
don't
foot.
believe there's an alley there, but their backyard fence is a chain link.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's 2 foot to 3 foot tall.
So that's our 3 ways we see it. And so if it's visible, yes, they
Okay.
get cited for it.
Okay.
Speaking of alleyways, on the east side, I know you know what I'm talking about. On the east, there's an alleyway, and I have 3 properties, 3 lots. And to get to the back lot, I have to go through the alley because it's between 2 houses. Well, one of the houses has blocked the alleyway, and I've asked him, you've asked him, and he's still not moving. It's been like 4 months now, and I can't get back to my back end. You know, they built the house over there, and it's looking all nice. I want to clean it up back there because I had barrels back there and some tin back there, whatever, but I can't even get my
What's he
trailer.
blocking it with?
How is he blocking the alley?
He has a truck and 2 trailers, and he works for the city, and that's the bad part.
It's not.
And I
It's
keep
not an
asking, but
excuse.
nothing's
It's not an
happening, you know?
Right.
So I want to know what I need to do, you know, because it's getting annoying.
Is that always
Just
been your
let me know the
access?
address.
Yes, I've always been access. It used to be a trailer house back there my uncle stayed in, and the 2 lots, my
I can
grandpa
take
owned it
you
all.
there after the meeting if
But-
you like.
I mean, he does it purposely.
That's always been your access.
And I had to get a survey to get access to the other side where my parking lot was. And because he was putting stuff on there and I'd asked him to move, he was like, well, this is our property, but it's not. It was my grandfather's property, but my mom owned this part and he lives with my grandpa's ex-wife. So he parks stuff in my way purposely, being a butt. And I keep asking. I try to avoid going to the police because he works for the city, but it's getting annoying. And it's an alleyway. He does it purposely.
Alley is a right of way.
Huh?
So an alley is a type of right of way.
Right.
Just like you couldn't park and block a street, you can't park and block it.
Right.
Is there a shortfall in our ordinances, or is there just nothing on our end of things?
It's a city employee.
Yeah.
And so with past direction, staff does not send out letters to city employees. We try to work with them gracefully. And we may have been too graceful in our approach.
So there's nothing
But
from
no
us?
matter what, you can't block an alleyway.
Correct. You
Period.
cannot block an alleyway. An
Not
alleyway is
illegal.
for access, and then small utility easements are for utilities, and you can't block those either.
It will be taken care of.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for code enforcement on the report?
Ben, where are we at on Rice Street? Because I'm,
So, on rough number in my head, we sent about 8 letters on that street, and all have complied except a few. And so they're in the portion where they're seeing the judge. And then, like I was mentioning earlier, we have a plan in place with the new city manager on if a certain amount of time elapses and there's no compliance, then the city will go abate that and then send a bill. And then if it doesn't get paid, we'll put a lien on the property.
the street signs, I think it's Miller Street, or Rice. Has that been cleared up yet? That entire street sign is covered with vines about
Okay.
8 feet. Do you know if that's been cleared up yet?
If you see anything like that, let me know, because I miss that sometimes. And so what we do is we put a service order in the system, and then the Public Works Streets crew will go out there and clear that sign, so it's visible.
Miller and Rice.
Is that Miller that,
No.
it's where right past the Robertson's house, you go
On the curve?
and it curves around, and it'd be the first street to the right.
Okay.
And you can't even read the sign, so I don't know what street it is.
Okay,
It's covered, I mean, there's vines all
It's
over.
the road that goes to the backside, almost towards the juvenile.
Correct.
Once you leave Rice Street, you come
Okay.
around the curve, then you turn the first right.
Yeah.
So it'll be right there on that corner.
Remind me, Ben, we passed some ordinances or amended some ordinances. We added some teeth, and are we coming up on the first fiscal year of that?
correct. You are.
And so when the letters go out this time, they'll have higher amounts?
Well, specifically for code enforcement, we've always had teeth. To not get too much in specifics, there's been non-compliance in our court system, and so it's trying to encourage them to comply. So I've met with the new city manager, and like I said, we have a plan in place of if it's going to be on the city dime, what we'll do and what the timeline will be. But the other ordinances that you have in mind, specifically tires, distributors, parking on grass, all of that, you're coming on your first year where all that is going to take effect. Each one has a different thing that will need to be discussed on where we're at that we can talk about if you like, but in essence of time, I won't get too down in specifics.
Will that be in your reports, do you think, or not?
It's not typically. I'll just show you guys the numbers. If you want something added to the report, I can certainly do that. You just need to let me know what type of information you want, how specific you want it to be, or how vague you want it to be.
Any other questions?
That road is Smith Road, so it's Rice and Smith.
Right.
Rice and Smith.
Maybe while y'all are out, swing by if you have a couple extra minutes, just-
Yeah, we'll get a service order on it, so that'll get taken care of.
All right, we'll close out the monthly code enforcement, and we'll go on to receive the Development Services Department report.
Okay, so this is the Development Services report for the month of July. We break it down by the type of permits that we've issued this month. If you look, we've issued 21 building permits, 0 of demolition, 29 electrical permits, 0 HVAC, and then 15 plumbing. And so a lot of your electrical, Los Robles is a mobile home park that is starting to move in new trailers for old trailers, and so in doing that, they have to disconnect their service and reconnect, which takes a city inspection. That's going to have your numbers there. Same with the building permits. A lot of them are moving in new units in that park. Now, if you look at the new homes, we do not consider moving permits as new homes, so just keep that in mind. 6 new homes have been built, and they all are at Cornerstone this month, which brings you to the value of $755,846 that's roughly been invested in our community. As far as other things that we have been up to as development services, we've held 4 staff meetings for potential developments. We hold them every Wednesday at 10:30 to 11:30, where we field questions with the city manager, Public Works, and myself to help anybody with development questions, since there is a lot to take in. And so in that, 1 property was on the west side, and then 3 were on the east side.
Is everything going smoothly at Cornerstone?
It is. It is. There was a few hiccups at the start, I guess, for DR Horton's side of things, but I think they've figured it out, and there's processes in place for each steps that we have to hit. So it's been going pretty smoothly.
I drove through there this time last week, and everything has a sold sign on it, basically.
Yep. We're getting a lot of new water accounts that are starting to open up. And then I've also gotten a call in that we're going to work out with the county on voting. And so it's officially underway. There are people going to register to vote out there in Cornerstone subdivision.
About 40 homes so far?
So right now we've issued 42
42?
homes.
many certificate of occupancy?
We have 9. 9 COs
They've
have been
closed
issued.
on 9 homes already.
They close before certificate of occupancy. What they'll do is they'll pour the slab and then they'll sell. But as far as certificate occupancies from the city, there's 9 been issued. So 9 of those are livable structures according to the city. But they sell quickly, and so yeah, they may all be sold now. But that's what they'll do. They'll pour the slab and then sell.
That's basically what I'm seeing when I drive through out there. It's, okay. Any other questions from the Development Services Department? Thank
I
you.
wasn't this rough on you.
That's why you're my
I'm just
you're
saying.
you're my
This
favorite.
room.
I,
Oh, I'm his favorite Williams.
All right, this is moving right along. Action
Yeah,
item
nothing to say
D.
on that.
Consider and take any necessary action on a recommendation to the city council regarding a preliminary plat submitted by Mike Richards for property known as 1013 West Cameron Avenue, Rockdale, Milam County, Texas, into Lot 1.
So this is a preliminary plat, so this will go to city council after this meeting, because you guys will only handle short form subdivisions. On this preliminary plat, we had original comments that we have sent back and they have been corrected. It was really minor things. One was about the easement, which you'll see on, it show better on your paper than this PowerPoint, but there's some language issues when they were trying to locate where easements were on this property.
I saw potential pipeline or gas line or
Yeah,
something.
and so what they've done is they overlaid those gas lines with the easements, and that's what they're proposing on this preliminary plat. And so there should be in your packets, if you have the full packet, that language that they used when they did that search for the easement, so you can see what they were seeing when they were trying to draw this out. As far as that, this is a really clean preliminary plat, and the staff recommends approval.
When's their start date? Have they already bought the property, I'm assuming?
I believe they're under contract.
Okay.
So is this the one with the mobile home back up in there?
Yes.
Or yes?
No,
This
it's
is
between the
right
car
next to,
wash and the General store?
yes.
Or dollar store?
The Dollar General. It's
So
right
does it
next
have
to
the
Dollar.
mobile home back up in there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Several.
It's a small,
And will that be staying there, do you know?
No, no.
Everything's gonna be out?
they're clearing everything.
This will be an auto zone when it's all said and done.
Okay.
Are they, I know how, I used to own the car wash, and I know how that drains through there. Are they bringing that up any?
So they've sent in your packet that you'll see if you
Yeah.
have the full,
I
they've
can't
proposed, it's above my level of expertise as well. So that's why we hire engineers out. So we'll have them look at it, see what they're proposing as their drainage, and if it works, if they have comments, they'll work directly with the developer to correct those comments. But
And
that is,
so-
that's why they do a preliminary plat. And then they'll go in and they'll approve everything on the lot. They'll come back to you with final plat once all that's said and done, and then they can go vertical.
So let's say it again now. This is for the preliminary plat, and you see your recommendation is,
Staff recommends approval as is. It's a very clean preliminary plat.
Make a motion that we approve.
I'll second it.
so we have a motion, to approve and a second. Those in favor?
Unless he has a question.
Yeah, I do have a question real quick. So when we're approving this, is this in regards to the sign as well? Is it all in there as one?
So their variance
Okay.
requests are for the signs, but they'll have to come back for final plat, asking for final approval on that variance request.
And the council will be the one that approves the variance.
Correct.
Okay.
Council
so-
will be the final approval on all of the plats, because this isn't a short form. But
Right.
yes, this is your first look, that they have an existing billboard that they're asking to keep, as well as another detached sign. And so in our code, we have size requirements which wouldn't allow for a billboard anymore. And then we have a requirement specifically to only allow one detached sign, which they are proposing two. So
Okay.
they're asking you for 2 variances.
So the sign that's existing, that's already there, is a billboard, right? Okay. So that one's gonna stay the same, is what you're saying, because they're not gonna be on that one, right? So it's existing and on their property, but it's not their sign.
It's on the far edge of their property.
It's in between the car wash and their property, or is it on their property?
It's on their property.
So it's on their property, it's gonna stay the same as is, but they don't receive any income and they're not going to be on that, advertising on that sign. Is that what you're saying?
They can advertise eventually if the spot opens,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
that's
so-
not what they're using for their business
They
at the
got a
moment.
long-term lease on that, the sign company has a long-term lease on that spot to lease that spot from the landowner.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, they're not gonna be advertising on that sign at this point.
Right.
And they're not gonna be getting income.
Right, and so what the variance is doing is it's acknowledging that billboard. So if they wouldn't essentially advertise on that because they're gonna
Right.
have their own detached.
Okay, so I guess my question is this, on their detached, is there detached in what we expect everybody else to be in?
Oh, yes,
The detached is
Yes.
exactly, that's all I'd like to know, is as long as the detached is what we expect of everyone else,
yes.
then we can't help it that,
Wasn't it a
Yeah.
30-foot, it's gonna be similar to the Park West one or the Dollar General
Yes.
signs that are in existence?
If you want to see one that the most recent single tenant freestanding sign is what we define it as, is actually at the stores that the Cornegie's have built. Those signs are the most recent ones. That's what it's going to look like. So yes, it will follow city code. The only reason they're asking for a variance is because there's already one detached sign that the
On there.
billboard is classified as. So they have to ask for a variance to have another one.
Okay.
And then they have to ask a variance to keep the billboard because the billboard doesn't meet the square footage requirement. It exceeds it. And so they're acknowledging that use as a variance, and then they're asking to put their own sign as a variance.
So I wouldn't really understand how this is going down. Well, I'm glad we're having some questions before we vote. They also said that there was no need for a retention pond because of the runoff wouldn't meet requirements. At what time do we, as planning and zoning, sit down and say, we need to really do a survey of how much water we're pushing into a limited area?
That's really going to be your engineer's call. So the city will hire an engineer who we've been using KPA as of recent, and they've been excellent to work with. They will do that analysis, and then if there's corrections that need to be made, they go by developer basis when they submit for these plans to correct those items. Then they'll put those improvements in, and then you'll see it again for a final where they've put in whatever the city has remarked, whatever the engineers have remarked, and then they'll get your final approval on the variance, and then the lot as a whole to become an official document where it'll be this lot, and then they can start building.
But as it is right now, we don't have an official floodplain or water collection estimate or anything like that, right?
So we go by the FEMA floodplain map, which was done in the 80s. They've recently added a tool that has been pretty helpful that gives you a floodplain estimate that we've used as well. That's far more up to date than the 80s map, but it's pretty similar. We'll use that, and then yes, correct. When we get a development come in, we send that off to the engineers, and that is their expertise. It's not necessarily going to be a staff expertise because drainage is a very complicated thing.
But that does happen prior to final approval of the final plat.
And so all of that was wrapped up in your assessment and why you're
Yes.
saying it's okay, right?
Yes, so your typical process, every preliminary plat you see comes with drainage documents. Those documents we include in the packet in case you can't sleep at night and you want to read it. Those go to the engineers, and then every comment the engineer has, we send to the developer. It gets corrected. Once everything's tied up in a bow and is done according to city standard, then you get it back as a final plat. So that's construction plans they submit, drainage plans, all of that happens after preliminary plat approval.
So we have a vote on hold right now. Has anybody mind changed or any other questions?
No.
So motion was made that we accept, the terminology here,
The preliminary.
to accept a preliminary plat. And all those in favor, raise your right hand.
I made the motion, who's second?
John Deere.
All right, E, consider and take any necessary action on a short form subdivision submitted by Forrest Sasser for property known as 210 Pine Street, Rockdale, Milam County, Texas, into one lot.
So you may recognize this address. This is actually one that's on the home program. And so this is a short form subdivision. If approved by this commission, it will be finalized. So this is the first one that you'll see like this. Staff only had a couple comments on this. The first is, this is the surveillance company first time working with the city. And so they put on the notarized signature blocks for County of Williamson, but we're in Milam County. And so we've asked them to change that so that Mr. Mante can sign in Milam County and not in Williamson County. The second thing is they did not identify a lot and block number on this lot. So typically when you see a short form subdivision, it means it was platted one time before, so you usually see it designated as Lot 1. When you come for a short form subdivision, our code requires it to be a lot, numerical designation, and alphabetical. So you usually see a 1A.
And a couple of us are missing this
Okay.
in our packet.
Very back in this small.
Very back of which one?
This one. Request placement plan is on in Forest Sasser.
I put my glasses on and took them off, and I still can't find it.
It's
Last
the
two
second to the
pages.
last two pages.
Last two pages of your packet.
Well, this says AutoZone.
Last,
Nope.
It's
Sorry,
so small, I
Charlie.
didn't recognize it in the notes when I read it.
Did you find it?
I did.
I
read
got
this.
nothing but
I think
auto-
it was the last
Well,
one.
I'm
This one.
6
Is that in your
in.
hand right there, John?
No, this is what he just handed me,
That's a
but
green piece right here at the
Yep.
middle. You see that green color.
I know, and I'm getting old.
Here you go. Here's Jason's.
No, I got one here, I just don't, okay, we're good, go ahead. You don't need it? I just don't wanna get confused.
but it's changed a little bit from what I read the other day,
I know.
it seems like, but.
I saw it in my packet.
Because but go ahead, you were saying that on a replat, you have to have numerical alphabetical. Anytime you see 1A, you know that it's been replatted
Correct.
somewhere.
Correct. It was platted once and it's changed from that original plat. And so it's a new plat, which they'll say it's 1A or 2A. They'll give it a numerical and alphabetical designation. And so that's essentially what's happening here. We're just asking them to put that language on the plat so that way it'll actually be identifiable when it's filed. Because right now, as it is, it's just a lot that hasn't been marked as a lot number designation.
So that's two annotations.
Both minor, but needed.
So how wide will each of these be when they end up?
So this is just one lot.
And it's not gonna be split?
Correct.
Okay.
The reason that they're replatting this is you may have recall in some legal descriptions that you hear that you'll have lot 1 part of.
Yes.
This was this case where it was platted in reference to a plat in the past. And now since they're building a new home on it, the city requires it to be updated to current platting standards. And so they're coming in for a short form subdivision that's correcting that language and combining those lots into that one lot, which is how it was in the field. So nothing's necessarily gonna change other than just correcting that legal
So new
description.
homes going on this over here?
It's currently being built. If you go out there, it's framed up, right across from the skate park.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is that whole area that's in flux right now because of the Papa's patio coming in and then the thought process of the skate park and all of this is.
Fire deal? Is
Yeah,
that coming too?
Yeah.
What?
The
Fire department, memorial.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
But that land was still needed to be a
okay.
memorial for two fire, guys that perished in a fighting a fire.
Charles, you're getting ahead of yourself.
So what we have
That's pretty
before us,
straightforward.
what we have before us is a replat. Any other questions for Ben on the replat?
Y'all are recommending,
Approval subject to those two conditions, changing the signature block to Milam County and then giving it a lot and block designation.
Well, I make a motion that we approve it on our level and send it on to city council with the conditions that can.
So this one doesn't have to go to city council.
But doesn't,
No,
you're
that's just-
right.
this is our
This is a
first
short
Our first
It's
one.
all on us.
It's all on us now.
So you can approve it to these conditions, and then once it's corrected, staff will go for signature and file.
You're right.
Go ahead.
So I'll make the motion that we approve it based on those conditions.
So, can I ask a
Go ahead.
question real quick? It's kind of good. So they already started building on this prior to, so did they get permits to build prior to getting this cleared up?
They did, because there's not gonna be an issue in this plat. This is gonna, in short form subdivisions, if you can remember, they're what you call ministerial. So they're not up for discretion if they meet city code. We knew this was gonna meet city code and state code, and so it would have to be approved. So that's why you can give them a permit early. It just, this needs to be filed for them to get a certificate of occupancy.
Because some of them I know have been held up because you won't give a permit after they get it
Correct.
ready to build, and then you don't give the permit, and now you say this one didn't have a problem getting a permit?
This one did not.
Okay.
It goes on a, there is logic to the madness that we can discuss after the meeting if you'd like.
No, I'm good. Got a permit.
Motion's been made, seconded, that we replat
Yes.
with annotations. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion was made, seconded, and carries.
First of many.
Our first.
Mm-hmm.
I feel so special. All right. Workshop. Conduct a workshop regarding Chapter 11, Chapter 211 of the Texas Local Government Code.
Get the PowerPoint.
Charles, get the lights.
Do I just click this next button?
You know how long this is gonna take?
As long as you got.
Well, I know somebody told me she had to leave at 2:20, but
We'll make this quick.
I just saying.
So this is chapter 211. In a basis of what this covers, it's going to cover how and why you can rezone, who your board of adjustments are, and what you do with non-conforming land use. I have abbreviated this as much as possible, and I'm going to abbreviate it even more in a presentation. If you have a question, interrupt me, please, because this is a very long chapter. So the first section, if you actually had the code in front, is going to be 211.03, which is going to talk about zoning regulations and what we can regulate. So if you look in our zoning code, we regulate everything that's in here. The height of buildings, impervious cover, if you remember changing that recently, yard size, population density, location and use, and then the pumping and extraction of groundwater. That's not from us. In the next section, we talk about compliance with the comprehensive plan. Since we've just updated a plan, you look to that plan when you have any new zoning ordinance. And there's criteria that has to be met when you're approving a zoning ordinance, which is listed. So you're supposed to lessen street congestion, you have to provide safety, promote general health and welfare, promote adequate light, prevent overcrowding, avoid concentration of population, and then facilitate for transportation, water, sewer, schools, all of that. So any zoning ordinance you get is gonna meet those criteria and be in compliance with your comprehensive plan. So you'll see in the future when you get rezone requests, you'll most likely get a document that our comprehensive plan has in it that says what this piece of land is zoned as and what the future looks for that. So that way you can compare that with your comprehensive plan and decide if you wanna approve that zone change or not, because zone changes are discretionary, so they do not have to be approved. The next section talks about the zoning districts. Essentially, all this section is telling you is when you do a zoning district, it has to be uniform in how you regulate that. So you can't have 3 blocks of residential single family and then choose 2 houses that have different regulations and then the rest follow another regulation. If you're gonna designate a zoning district, it has to be uniform. And then they can vary depending on different type of zoning classifications. So R1 designation, single family, is gonna have different regulations than residential duplexes are, and so on and so forth. That's all this section is telling you. The next section is gonna talk about adopting these regulations. This is something that staff does every day when we get a zone change before you see it. There's a notice that's required that has to be sent 15 days before the public hearing. And then we have to notify property owners within a 200-foot district before 10 days of that notice. Now this talks about kind of what we ran into last time. When you have neighbors that may not be a fan of the zone change, there's criteria that has to be met to protest it. The first is, if you can think of a block-wide zone change, 20% of those people in that area have to say that they do not want that zone change for it to be considered protested. The one that you're more accustomed to seeing is the one-offs where you have this one piece of land asking for a zone change. That one, anybody within 200 feet, 20% of those have to be against for it to be protested. And then once it gets protested, it does not automatically die. It just takes 3/4 of an affirmative vote to approve it.
When you say the word protest,
Protest would be against. So if I, Ben, come before you and I own a property in the city and I want to change the zoning, and now I notify all my neighbors within 200 feet that this zoning's changed, there's a calculation that goes on area of land, the streets and alleys, to total 100%. If 20% of that land, which would include the landowners, is against it, then it's officially protested, and it takes 3/4 affirmative vote to approve.
and you know they're against it by,
They come to you before the public hearing and speak it, or they send a letter into staff signed that they're against. Because when we send out zone change letters, we have a comment section at the bottom that asks if you can't make the meeting, please sign if you're for or against, and then send it back. And so that's what we got. So that's what we got last time. We had a couple letters that came back, so we knew people were against it. A lot more
Also
showed
allowing
up.
phone calls as well.
Correct. Anything that we can have as a record that we can keep would count.
So you receiving a phone call as a planning commission member would not count toward it as a protest necessarily, officially in the count.
It wouldn't.
the official notice has to go to city hall, or
It has to be in writing, or they have to come to the public hearing.
Right.
Oh, so no phone call.
They could send you their protest or their objection, and you turn it in for them. That would be official, but if they just call you on the phone and say that we're against this, that would not be.
our advice to them would be,
It would.
Send in, either come to the public hearing or send in
Yeah.
a written notice. And that can be an email. It doesn't have to be mailed, hard mail.
It's just something that's in writing that you have permanent record of. So like if somebody called you or me, and then we hung up the call, then nobody knows that call happened except me and the neighbor or whoever called. And so there's no record of it. So then that just prevents staff from going in and saying so many people are protesting it just to make it harder on them, you know.
We just all need to remember that because we've let that happen.
And so the other thing within this is to protest, you have to meet one of those requirements. You have to be in the district that's being rezoned, or you have to be within 200 feet. Because we've had people at the last meeting come and they can speak their mind as much as they want, but it just doesn't count as far as a percentage of protest.
And I will also point out, just because you don't have the number of people protesting required to automatically have a protested vote, that doesn't prevent the board from voting against a particular application. If you've received personal phone calls, it doesn't, that can sway your vote potentially. It just doesn't.
well, a little history behind it. We did have an issue like this come before us, and several people were calling me and saying, what do I do? And I was of the opinion that you had to come before City Hall and get your in, and I also said, when it comes up, you can come in and you can sign in. And then I got to thinking, was I telling them the right information? Was that good intel that I gave out? You know,
Sounds like it.
because calling your neighbors and calling me, you know, it doesn't do anything, but there's a proper route, and this is per municipal code, right? Well, so, yeah.
So the next section talks about you guys, the zoning commission. So home rule cities shall adopt a zoning commission, and then general law may adopt a zoning commission. And so, if in case you did not know, we are home rule, and so we've adopted a committee. It's in our charter. If you haven't had a chance to read that, I would highly recommend that. As far as your authority, you can recommend boundaries for zoning districts. You can amend and adopt zoning regulations. You guys also handle plats as well. Next, we're going to talk about the Board of Adjustments. The code calls for 5 members that they have to serve 2-year terms. Your governing body can be determined by charter or ordinance, which is what we do. Our Board of Adjustments is our city council. For a case to be heard, there has to be a 75% attendance. And then just a side note, we're not a type A general law, but in case you cared to know, they may grant members of a governing body to act as the Board of Adjustments as well. Now, the authority of that board, they hear and decide on any variance request for the zoning ordinance, for building setbacks, things of that nature. In approving a variance, there is a set of criteria that has to be met. They have to make sure that when they approve that variance, it's not contrary to public interest, and they have to make sure that it doesn't cause an unnecessary hardship, which I will explain what that means on the next slide. Now, as far as when they approve, it takes 75% of the vote from them to approve the variance request, deny the variance request, or amend it. They can do any of the 3.
And that's why you have to have 75% of attendance, because that would be, if you only had 75% attendance, it would take a unanimous vote of those in attendance.
Now, when defining an unnecessary hardship, did someone have a question? Question? Okay. In determining what an unnecessary hardship is, there's a list of criteria. The first is going to be financial cost of compliance. If it is 50% more than the appraised value of the structure to bring it into compliance, then that will constitute as an unnecessary hardship. The second would be if they're bringing it into compliance and they have to cover 25% more of the area, that would be an unnecessary hardship. Another would be if they bring the property into compliance, they would bring the structure out of compliance. That would be an unnecessary hardship. And then compliance, if it results in an encroachment on the neighbor, an unnecessary encroachment, it would be deemed as an unnecessary hardship. And then the final is if we consider the structure to be non-conforming, that would bring unnecessary hardship. So there's a list that the Board of Adjustments, your city council, would have to look at when having a variance request to define if that's unnecessary or not. And so it is defined in state law what they'd be looking at. Now, after a decision is made, the applicant can appeal to the board or someone else can appeal to the board. So it's broken out in 2 sections. So if someone who's not related, anybody that's agreed by the decision can appeal to your board. So it'd go back to the Board of Adjustments or any official with the city.
To appeal a decision of the board? It actually has to go to the court. It does. If the council makes a ruling on an application for a variance and it's denied or it's approved, the person appealing it has to appeal it in district court.
Yeah. So right, that's the next slide after this. This is appealing the decision. And so if they're related to the application, the person who filed it can appeal. The owner of the land that the appeal was requested can appeal. Someone who's agreed within the 200-foot boundary, any officer or city member can appeal. And then if you're going to appeal, you have to let them know no later than the 20th day after the decision was made. Also, then what Mr. Kelty was speaking on is going to district court. If you're going to appeal to the district court, you have to do within 10 days after that was filed. They can either reverse, approve, or deny, or amend the request. And so who can appeal would be anyone aggrieved by the decision, a taxpayer, or an officer, department board of the municipality. And so then this section is going to speak on zoning of appearance of buildings. And so that actually is going to include landscaping. So it's all for single-family zoning that this section is referring to. So if you have any zoning regulations that apply to exterior appearance of structures or landscaping, what this section is telling you is that once that's approved, if there's already a plat in that subdivision that's approved, you have to give them 2 years by either one of those dates, the date that the plat was approved or the date that the city essentially accepts the infrastructure. Whichever comes later is the one that date takes effect, and then the ordinance would be in effect in that property. So you have to give them time. Now, the one thing that they do note in this section is building codes start from day one. So they don't get a timeline to go to a past building code or whatever they were previously under before you adopted these regulations. Now, since you're the historic board, I thought this would be important for you guys to see. When designating historic landmarks or districts, you have to have the owner's consent, and it's going to be the same as your Board of Appeals. If they do not consent, you have to have a 75% or 3/4 affirmative vote from both your council and your historic board. And then just a side note, if it's a religious organization, which is defined in a way later chapter in the local government code, you have to have their consent to designate them. So if you do a block that's historic and you have a religious organization like a church, and we have one in downtown, so if we thought about doing downtown, we'd have to think about that. You'd have to have their consent. And so this is quite a lengthy section, so we're going to continue. When you do the designation, you have to notify the property owner no later than the 15th day, and then you have to let them know what their regulations are, what the procedure is for designation, tax benefits they may receive, and then any rehabilitation or repair programs that they may be applicable for. And then we have to allow them to withdraw consent at any time. Now, this section speaks on when we annex property, what the code would require. And so you can see on that date, there's September 1st, 2003. Anything that we annex after that day, we cannot prohibit the non-conforming land use as long as it was legal at the time, or if you can think of a preliminary plat that's going final the 90th day before you annex it. Now, it does not prevent from annexing that we can have authority over sexual-oriented businesses, colonias, destruction of property, public nuisance, flood control, etc. And so anything that would essentially be harm to the public, we can regulate right away. But you have to allow and respect someone's use of the land if you incorporate it. And so that's what we're going to continue in this section if you do the same with the mobile home community. If a mobile home community becomes non-conforming, so if, say, one day that we decided that mobile home zoning changed, and so you didn't allow for certain stipulations, they would be considered non-conforming, like a Los Robles that we spoke about earlier that's moving in the mobile homes. We'll use them as the example. They're allowed to continue the use if it's authorized by law, and if at least 50% of those residential lots in that are being used as a residency currently. And then we can require a change, which we can require the number of lots to be decreased, and then they have 12 months to not abandon it, essentially. If they abandon it for more than 12 months, then it's a non-conforming use at that point. And that number changes outside of mobile home parks, which we'll get to in just a second. So the state does regulate on what we can and can't do with mobile homes. And so someone is allowed to install, if it meets your ordinance for non-conforming land uses, which we do have, and then it meets all state and federal laws. And then essentially what a non-conforming land use is when you have a use of a property and then a zoning code is changed, amended, or passed, that land is no longer in conformance to that ordinance. It's legal non-conforming.
So it can continue in that, legally in that use for as long as it is used for that purpose. But if it ever changes, they would lose that legal nonconformance, or if it becomes vacant, it would lose that legal nonconformance for a certain period of time.
Mm-hmm. And so there is a way for the municipality to require a non-conforming land use to stop, which we'll get into, but what they'd have to do is they'd have to take official action as the board, and then they'd have to determine that it has adverse effect according to applicable law. And so in doing that, they are required a payment. And so that number is brought by the payment of ceasing the use. So if you can imagine, they may have to tear down the building, we have to pay them that cost. Then they'd also get the difference between what the market value of the property is on the day that the use was listed as non-conforming, and then either the day before the notice was given or when they submit an application requesting to stop the non-conforming use. So you would take those 2 days, and that market value difference would be what you owe them.
And that's based on the principle of unconstitutional taking of property. You know, you can't take somebody's property unless you compensate them properly. So changing the zone could change the value of their property. Requiring them to stop using, now, creating the legal nonconformance doesn't necessarily do that, but actually causing them to stop using it in the way they have been using it would be considered unconstitutional taking if you didn't compensate them.
So in that, there is a notice requirement that you have to tell them within 10 days and send written notice to stop the use, and what they're allowed to have compensation-wise. You give them the option of how they want to be paid. They have to respond to you within 30 days. And then if the municipality pays them when they send in their request of however they want to be paid, they have 10 days to stop that use entirely. They can appeal your decision to the Board of Adjustments. And then the section now speaking to you guys on that is different from the mobile homes is what Mr. Kelty referred to. If you stop using the use for 6 months continuous, then you lose your non-conforming use. And so you would not be applicable to any of these stipulations. And with that, that is the presentation. So if you have questions on those sections, I'm more than happy to answer them for you. It's very lengthy. So I've done my best to abbreviate that, but still make as much sense as possible that state law allows.
So if a particular piece of land is rezoned from residential to commercial, but there's existing homes within that area, you know, if those homes become vacant for longer than 6 months, as long as they're not mobile homes, then they could potentially lose that legal nonconformance. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. That is correct. And so we've had that happen before. We've had someone challenge us on this code when I was here for about a year, and they had stopped their use for 12 months. And so since they've done that, it was not a mobile home. That non-conforming land use came off, and they weren't entitled to any of that section. And so that's what your staff deals with. We look at this on any zone change request we have. If somebody's going to appeal to the Boards of Adjustments, that is an internal staff function that is also written out in your ordinances. And of course, it's written out in state law. So it's all taken care of.
By staff, Ben means Ben.
There's a lot of regulations, but obviously for good reason. You know, you're dealing with people's property, and we're a private property nation, and so you want to protect people's rights as much as possible. Any questions on any of those fun sections that we learned about?
Thank you, Ben. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
If you get bored and you can't sleep, read chapter 211, and you'll fall asleep within 5 minutes.
I put that in my notes.
Just
Get bored and can't sleep.
I have a copy if you want to read it.
I think
So
you
you have a
gave us a
copy?
link, didn't you? You sent us a link.
We did
Yeah.
attach the documents if y'all want to read it.
What categories are the big hitters in non-conforming?
There's not essentially one. It really deals with your zoning. So it depends. each city's different. And so I can tell you a lot of cities try to regulate mobile homes as much as they can. And so that will be your big hitter, which is why it's its own section entirely. Another one would be typically the size of your residential lots, because way long ago, developers, when they were platting, like to do very narrow lots. And then in the later years, the cities like to have a bigger yard. So even in our ordinance, we still require a 70-foot lot width, which is bigger now than current development standards. That's where you'll see a lot of non-conformance at, things of that nature. But as far as a big hitter, it's just tough to say. City by city, it changes.
All right, then. Y'all accept his workshop?
Well, I guess.
If no further questions, that concludes our workshop, and that also concludes this meeting.
What is the workshop next time you mentioned?
Should be 212, chapter 212.
12.
Yeah, and it's one that we